Good morning. Today is Friday, August 29th, 2025. Ki satsur el ir yamim rabim lilachem aleh l'safsa. When you surround a city in a siege for a long time in order to be able to conquer the city, lo sashkis es etza lindoach alav. You should not cut down a tree by swinging an axe at it. Ki mimeni sochel, because from the tree you eat. Obviously, we're talking about fruit trees. Va'oso lo sichros, and you should not destroy them, fruit trees. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh lavo mipanecha b'matzor. A tree in the field is the life of mankind. So, if you come in with the siege, don't cut down the fruit tree. Rak eitz asher teda ki lo eitz macholhu. Only if there is a tree that you know that it does not provide any fruit. Also sashkis. That you are allowed to cut down. V'charasa ubanisa matzar alohir asher hi osa imcha milchama adridita. That tree you could cut down in order to build up, maybe it's a ramp or a berm or something else, in order to be able to conquer the city. So we learn about this prohibition of cutting down fruit trees. And we have these words, lo sashkis, do not destroy. And that becomes a very significant and large collective area of Jewish law with many, many details. And it's known as bal tashkis, which generally means don't waste anything. Don't ruin anything that has some kind of purpose. I want to read to you, please, the words of Rav Shamshon Fol Hirsch. I've read them to you before. These are classic words. This prohibition of purposeless destruction of fruit trees around a besieged city is only to be taken as an example of general wastefulness. Under the concept of bal tashkis, the purposeless destruction of anything at all is taken to be forbidden, so that the lo sashkis of our text becomes the most comprehensive warning to human beings not to misuse the position which God has given us as masters of the world and its matter to capricious, passionate, or merely thoughtless, wasteful destruction of anything on earth. Only for wise use has God laid the world at our feet when he said to man, subdue the world and have dominion of it. When my kids were little and we were walking to shul, so little kids were walking on a sidewalk and there would be, let's say, a hedge or the tree. And little kids, as they often do, they would pull off a leaf. And whenever they did that, I said, ouch. Because I wanted them to learn that simply pulling a leaf off a tree or a bush for no reason, that's bal tashkis. It's prohibited. And it refers to anything. And it doesn't matter how small it is. And it doesn't matter if it belongs to someone else, even if it is ownerless, to waste resources for no reason, to waste electricity for no reason, to waste whatever it is for no reason, to throw good food into the garbage is bal tashkis. Give it to someone else who can use it. So we have this gigantic concept of bal tashkis that applies in so many areas of our life. But it's interesting that the Torah chooses to teach us this rule specifically in connection with trees. So I want to share with you part of an essay written by Rabbi Akiva Wolff. It was written many years ago. And I hope that you will find it as fascinating as I have found it. The Torah places great importance on the preservation of fruit-producing trees. It may be that in the eyes of our sages, fruit-producing trees symbolize the productive natural world, which is the life support system for man. This is a passage in the Medrash Echa. I have quoted it to you many times. B'shah she'kadosh baruch hu bara es ha'adam, when God created Adam and Eve, natlo v'achziro al kol ilene gan Eden, he took them to see all of the trees in the Garden of Eden. V'amar lo, and he said to Adam, Re'ei masai, look at my creations, all these trees. Kamenoim, how beautiful they are. Umeshubachim heim, and how valuable they are. V'chol masha barasi bishvilcha barasi, and everything that I created in the world, God says to Adam and Chava, I created it for you. Tein daitecha, be careful. Shlo tekalkel usachriv es olami, that you don't mess up or destroy any part of my world. She'im kilkalta, because if you mess something up on the earth, ein mei sheyasaken acharecha, there's no one to come along after you to fix it. Of course, this is one of the principal statements that creates the system of the ethics of protecting the environment in Jewish law and Jewish thought. But note that the example that is given is specifically about trees. It doesn't say that Hashem showed him all the plants, all the bushes, all the fruits, all the trees. Trees are the pinnacle of the vegetable world, vegetative world, because trees are what transforms the earth into an environment capable of supporting other forms of life. Listen to the words of the Sifri, the words of our sages. Listen to this. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh. So first our rabbis quote the verse because a person is a tree, like a tree in the field. Melame, this comes to teach us, shechayav shel adam einam ela min ha'ilan, that a person's life is only due to the existence of trees. Listen to Ibn Ezra, writing hundreds of years later. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, same verse, a person is like a tree in the field, v'atam, and the reason for this, says the Ibn Ezra, ki chaye ben adam hu eitz hasadeh, human life is dependent on trees. Now again, listen to Rabbeinu Bechaye, a couple of hundred years later in the medieval period. Pirshu hamafarshim, our commentators explain, says Rabbeinu Bechaye, ki chaye ha'adam umezono hu eitz hasadeh. This is a little bit different. The Rabbeinu Bechaye is saying that not only is a person's sustenance made possible by trees, but even our entire life is because of trees. Now, it's not exactly clear what these commentaries mean by saying that our entire life is dependent on trees. It's true that we get fruits and other things that we live on, but we have other sources of nutrition besides just trees. It is certainly true that we know today that trees are necessary for life because trees produce oxygen, and without trees, humans probably would not be able to be sustained. But this knowledge only came later in the modern period. It's not likely that these early commentators understood that. But they certainly understood that there is something specifically about fruit trees that is connected to sustaining life on earth. Now, notwithstanding the importance of trees, the prohibition of al-tashkis is not a blanket prohibition that prohibits cutting down any tree. The Talmud has a discussion. Amar Rav says, it's forbidden to destroy a date tree that yields at least a kav, that's like 2 liters, of fruit. Meaning as follows. If it is producing fruit that is an amount that's significant, you're not allowed to cut it down. But if it's only producing a little bit and it's worth more cut down, you're allowed to cut that down. Then listen to what the Gemara says. Rav Chanina said, Shivchas b'ni, my son, who is named Shivchas, lo shachiv bari, he died as a young man before his time, Dekat te'enasa b'lozmana. Dekat's te'enasa b'lozmana. Because he cut down a fruit tree. So, what this passage in the Gemara is telling us is that it is permitted to cut down a fruit tree for greater economic utility. If it's worth more cut down than the small amount of fruit it's giving, it's worth it. It can be cut down. But then the Gemara adds this second line, and this is repeated elsewhere in the Gemara, that there is a danger to a person in cutting down the tree. Shivchas b'ni, my son Shivchas, died prematurely because he cut down a tree. Now, there's a dispute among the commentators. Does the danger of cutting down a fruit tree apply only when you're not supposed to cut it down? It is producing a lot of fruit, and that is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva Yosef and others. However, there are many authorities who say, Rav Yaakov Emden, the Chassam Sofer, the Marsham, all giants of Jewish law, they say that cutting down a tree can be mortal danger for a person even when the halacha is you're allowed to cut it down. Wow. There's danger to cut down a fruit tree even when you're allowed to, according to Allah. I attended high school and Beis Medrash the years after high school, learning in yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael in Baltimore. In high school, there was a Beit Midrash. The study hall was on the top floor of the educational building. The yeshiva building, the yeshiva Beis Medrash, that was for those students who had finished high school. So they're sitting in the Beis Medrash, learning Torah all day. Had a very odd shape to it. I remember when I was a child, I may have told you, when I was a child, my father and my grandfather were home builders. That's how they started out. And I remember once my grandfather told me that the most efficient shape of building a home or any structure is a square. Square is the most efficient use of space, efficient use of resources. That's the most efficient. This Beis Medrash, the study hall in Ner Yisrael, was a very unusual shape. You walked in, and the room was maybe 40 or 50 feet from front to back, and maybe 200 feet from side to side. You could fit 400 or 500 people there, but it was unnaturally shaped. Front to back was so short, but it was very, very long. And I remember I asked somebody, why is this room shaped like this? It's so odd. And they told me, because behind the building there was a fruit tree. And when they built the building, they decided that even though they needed that space to build this building, they decided not to cut down the fruit tree. Okay, let's go to a whole nother level. Because in addition to the danger of cutting down a fruit tree, our sages explain that there are other consequences, negative consequences of cutting down a fruit tree. And these are more mystical within the area of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. Listen to this. This is Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. So this is a collection of midrashim put together by Rabbi Eliezer. Listen to what he says. B'shah she'hanefesh yotza min haguf. At the moment that the soul of a person leaves the body, at the moment a person dies, and the soul leaves the body, Hakol yotze misof ha'olam vad sofo. There is a voice that goes forth from one end of the world to the other end of the world. Ve'ein hakol nishma. But that voice, that sound is not heard here on earth. Presumably it's heard in heaven, in Shamayim, but it's not heard here on earth. B'shah shekarsen es ha'ilan. Shuosapri. When a person cuts down a fruit-bearing tree, Hakol yotze mesof ha'olam vad sofo. There is a voice that goes out from one end of the world to the other. Ve'ein hakol nishma. But that voice is not heard here on earth. Now, what does it mean? A voice going from one end to the other, but it's not heard here on earth? I confess, I don't exactly know what that means, but it means certainly that there's something that is happening on a spiritual level when a person dies, and the exact same thing on a spiritual level is happening when a tree is cut down. What we see from this is that our sages, starting with the Torah and the Talmud, Jewish law and Jewish thought, place great importance on preventing the destruction of fruit-bearing trees. There's a Torah prohibition of baltashkis. There is some aspect of danger to a person in doing such a thing. And then there is some type of spiritual consequence that we may not be able to recognize, but there is a spiritual harm that is caused when a tree is cut down. There is a spiritual dimension to trees unlike any other vegetation. And that's what the pasuk means when it says, Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh. A person is like a tree. There is a certain spiritual similarity in the two, and we must have respect for both. Now, one way to understand this is that when I cut down a tree, even for my own benefit, I'm still doing so at the expense of everybody else in the world, because there's a loss to the world with one less tree. In effect, a person who cuts down a tree is cutting off part of the branch that supports all of us. And our sages want us to be aware and sensitive to the dangers and the negative consequences that result from this type of behavior. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh. My friends, I wish you a great day and a beautiful Shabbos. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.